Everyone around you is moving in one direction. Your friends, your family, your colleagues, all heading the same way, following the same path, adopting the same beliefs. And then there's you, standing still, questioning, resisting. Sound familiar? Here's what most people don't realize. This exact scenario played out with 900 million people. An entire generation moved as one. Those who stood still, they paid a price. But 1,500 years ago, a different approach emerged. One that celebrated the individual who refuses to follow the crowd. Same human psychology. Opposite outcomes. Can one person really stand still when the entire world is moving? Stay with me, because the answer determines whether you're living your life or just following someone else's. Let's start with what happens when the crowd moves by force. China, 1966. The Cultural Revolution begins. Millions of young people, teenagers, students, idealists, suddenly mobilize as the Red Guards. They move together, think together, act together. But here's where it gets disturbing. This wasn't voluntary. The pressure to join was immense. Your neighbors were joining. Your classmates were joining. Your teachers were encouraging it. If you stood still, if you questioned, if you refused, you became the target. And here's what happened to those who tried. Some were beaten. Some disappeared. Some betrayed their own beliefs just to survive. Think about what that means for a moment. Imagine waking up one day and everyone around you has adopted a new ideology overnight. They're wearing the same armbands, chanting the same slogans, attending the same rallies. And they're looking at you, waiting for you to join. The psychological pressure is crushing. Because humans are social creatures. We're wired to belong, to fit in, to move with the group. Mao understood this perfectly. He didn't just command obedience, he weaponized social pressure. Now here's what makes this so effective. When the crowd moves, standing still feels like betrayal. Not just to the group, but to yourself. You start questioning, am I wrong? Is everyone else seeing something I'm not? Should I just go along? During the Cultural Revolution, this pressure created waves of conformity. Students denounced their teachers. Children reported their parents. Friends turned on friends. Not because they wanted to, but because standing alone became unbearable. The Red Guards swept through cities like a tidal wave. Millions strong. Moving in perfect synchronization. But here's the part nobody talks about. Those who moved with the crowd, what happened to them when the movement ended? Many described feeling lost. They had moved so long with others that they forgot how to move on their own. They had become the crowd. And when the crowd dispersed, they didn't know who they were anymore. Consider the young Red Guard who spent years following group decisions. Every action determined by collective consensus. Every belief validated by group approval. What happens to that person's ability to think independently? To stand alone? To trust their own judgment? It atrophies. And here's what makes this so dangerous in any era. When you surrender your individual judgment to the crowd, you don't just lose the ability to stand still, you lose the ability to move in your own direction. You become dependent on the group to tell you where to go, what to think, how to act. So can one person stand still when the crowd moves by force? Technically, yes. But the cost is severe. Isolation. Persecution. Sometimes worse. But what if the crowd isn't moving by force? What if people are choosing to follow? Does that change anything? Keep that question in mind, because what comes next reveals something most people never consider. Now imagine a completely different scenario. A monastery. Hundreds of students. All training together. All following similar routines. But here's the critical difference. No one forced them to come. No one forces them to stay. No one punishes them for leaving. So why do they move together? And more importantly, can one still stand still? In the Shaolin tradition, there is a profound teaching. The crowd does not determine your path. You do. But here's where this gets fascinating. Even within a community of hundreds, each monk is fundamentally alone with their own discipline. They train together, but they master themselves individually. No one forces you to practice when you're tired. No one shames you for questioning a teaching. No one pressures you to adopt beliefs you don't genuinely hold. You can stand still anytime you want. Watch others progress. Observe the crowd moving forward. And here's what's remarkable, there's no punishment for it.
Why?
Because standing still isn't rebellion in this system. It's evaluation. It's the individual assessing whether the path is truly theirs. Shi teaches that true commitment only comes when you've had the freedom to reject it first. If you've never been allowed to stand still, how do you know you genuinely want to move? Consider the monk who watches others rise at dawn for meditation. He's allowed to sleep in. No master will reprimand him. The choice is entirely his. So he watches. He evaluates. He questions, do I want this? Is this my path? And then, after standing still and observing, he chooses. Not because the crowd moved, but because he decided to move. This is the fundamental difference. The crowd at Shaolin isn't a tidal wave that sweeps you along. It's a collection of individuals who happen to be walking in similar directions, each for their own reasons. But here's the part that seems impossible at first. This approach actually creates stronger collective movement. Because when people move by choice rather than force, they move with genuine commitment. And when the crowd disperses, when everyone goes their separate ways, these individuals keep moving. Because the movement was never about the crowd. It was about their own chosen direction. Now here's why most people struggle with this. Standing still while others move takes courage. Even when there's no force, no punishment, no persecution, it still feels uncomfortable. Your brain screams, everyone else is doing it. You're being left behind. Just join them. But Shi's teaching cuts through this. If you move because others are moving, you're not really moving. You're just being carried. Think of your friend who deleted Instagram while everyone else stayed addicted. They stood still, evaluated, then chose their own path, not because the crowd moved, but because they decided. Even if that direction eventually aligns with the crowd, the difference is everything. Because you chose it. You claimed it. You own it. So can one person stand still in a voluntary crowd? Absolutely. And that ability to stand still is what makes their eventual movement meaningful. Now let's compare these two scenarios directly, because the difference determines how you navigate every crowd in your life. So here's the experiment. Two crowds, same human psychology, completely different dynamics. One crowd moves by force. Stand still and you're punished. The other crowd moves by choice. Stand still and you're allowed. Here's a real test that reveals everything. Your entire friend group decides to quit stable jobs and start a crypto business. Everyone's in. Everyone's excited. Everyone's moving together. Do you join? In a forced movement system, you don't have a choice. The pressure is immense. Stand still and face rejection, isolation, ridicule. In a voluntary system, you can stand still. Watch. Evaluate. Ask, is this genuinely my path, or am I just following the crowd? Same situation. Opposite freedoms. Now think about your own life for a moment. How many of your decisions were made because you genuinely wanted to move in that direction? And how many were made because the crowd was moving and you didn't want to be left behind? College, jobs, beliefs. Did you choose them or just follow? Here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. We like to think we're independent thinkers. But we're far more influenced by the crowd than we admit. Look at how trends spread. The crowd moves and we move with it, often without realizing we never stopped to evaluate if we actually wanted to go that direction. One system forces this. The other simply allows it. But the result? Often the same. Most people follow the crowd either way. The difference is what happens when you do stand still. In Mao's system, standing still meant persecution. In Shi's system, standing still means self-discovery. Now here's the scale of this difference. Forced collective movements create uniformity. Everyone looks the same, thinks the same, acts the same. But internally, doubt, resentment, suppressed individuality. Voluntary collective movements create alignment. People moving in similar directions, each carrying their own reasons, their own commitment. The forced crowd collapses when the force disappears. The voluntary crowd persists because each person chose to be there. So which creates lasting change? History answers clearly. Forced movements eventually crumble. People scatter. But voluntary traditions endure for centuries. Because they're held together by individual choice, renewed daily. You tell me which one works. So here's your challenge. Think about the crowds in your life right now. Are you moving because you genuinely chose this direction? Or are you moving because standing still felt too uncomfortable? And more importantly, do you have the freedom to stand still and evaluate? Or would standing still come with consequences? Here's the truth nobody wants to hear. If you can't stand still, you're not moving freely. You're just being carried by the crowd. And the crowd doesn't care about your individual path. It only cares that you keep moving. If you're ready to explore what it means to choose your own direction, even when it means standing alone, then join us. We're building something extraordinary here, a community that values individual discernment over collective pressure. Drop your honest experience below. When was the last time you stood still while everyone around you moved? What happened? And if you're ready to question the crowds you've been following, hit subscribe. Because understanding this changes everything. Until we meet again, keep questioning, keep choosing, and keep growing. See you in the next one.